It was the last week of school before summer break. You know that feeling the excitement, the freedom, the promise of endless days with no responsibilities. For 10 high school seniors, it was the perfect time to celebrate. Jake's uncle owned an old farmhouse miles away from town, surrounded by dense woods and rolling fields. It was secluded, quiet, and most importantly, far from any prying eyes. The perfect spot for a pool party. The group arrived on Friday evening, their cars packed with snacks, drinks, and pool floats. The farmhouse was charming in a rustic kind of way, with a large backyard and a swimming pool that sparkled under the setting sun. Sure, the water looked a little murky, but no one thought much of it. They were too busy laughing, blasting music, and diving in. For a while, it was perfect, the kind of night you wish could last forever. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars came out, things started to change. It began with the lights. The string of fairy lights above the pool flickered and went out, plunging the backyard into darkness. Everyone laughed it off, blaming it on old wiring. They switched to their phone flashlights and kept the party going. But then the music stopped. The speakers, which had been fully charged, just died. An uneasy silence settled over the group. That's when Emma spoke up. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Guys, did you hear that?" Jake tried to play it cool, but even he couldn't hide the nervous edge in his voice. "Hear what? It's probably just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. As the group fell silent, they heard it's a faint, murmuring sound, like whispers carried on the breeze. It was coming from the woods. From there, things only got worse. The pool water, which had been crystal clear earlier, now looked dark and oily. A cold mist began to rise from the surface, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that everyone could see their breath. That's when they heard the splash. It was loud, like something heavy had been thrown into the pool. Everyone turned, their flashlights darting toward the water. The surface rippled violently, as if something massive had just submerged. What the hell was that? Jake tried to calm everyone down, but even he couldn't hide his fear. Probably just one of us messing around, right? But then he noticed something. Tyler was missing. Tyler had been there just moments ago, laughing and joking with the others. Now he was gone. "Tyler, this isn't funny." The pool was eerily still now, the ripples gone. The group gathered at the edge, their flashlights illuminating the dark water. That's when they saw in shadow moving beneath the surface. Something large, something unnatural. Before anyone could react, the water erupted. A figure shot out of the pool, drenched and pale, its eyes black and hollow. It wasn't Tylenot anymore. His face was twisted into a grotesque smile, his skin slick and grey. He lunged at the group, his movements jerky and unnatural. Screams filled the air as the friends scattered, running toward the farmhouse. They slammed the doors shut behind them, locking themselves inside. But the shadows followed. One by one, the friends disappeared. Emma was the first. She had locked herself in the bathroom, but when Jake went to check on her, she was gone. The only thing left was a trail of wet footprints leading back to the pool. Next was Mia. She had barricaded herself in the pantry, but her screams echoed through the house before suddenly cutting off. When the others opened the door, the pantry was empty. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls. The shadows seemed to seep through the walls, closing in on the remaining friends. Jake tried to keep everyone together, but it was no use. One by one, they were taken. By morning, only one person remained Emma's best friend, Sarah. She had hidden in the attic, trembling in the dark as the whispers and screams echoed below her. When the sun finally rose, the farmhouse was silent. Sarah stumbled outside, her face pale and her hands shaking. The pool was still, the water clear once more. The cars remained parked outside, untouched, but the others were gone. Sarah never fully recovered from that night. She couldn't explain what happened, not to the police, not to her family, not even to herself. The trauma of that night haunted her every waking moment. She never went back to the farmhouse, and she never spoke of it again. Thompsons had just moved into their dream-homier, sprawling estate with a lush backyard and a sparkling swimming pool. It was the perfect place for their teenage daughter, Emily, and their young son, Jake, to grow up. To celebrate their new beginning, they decided to throw a pool party, inviting a few close friends and neighbours. The sun was shining, the grill was fired up, and laughter echoed across the yard. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the party took a sinister turn. The first sign that something was wrong came when Jake, who had been splashing in the shallow end, suddenly froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the water around him. "Mum! Dad! There's something in the pool," he shouted, his voice trembling. Emily rolled her eyes. "Relax, Jake. It's probably just a leaf or something." But Jake wasn't convinced. He scrambled out of the pool, his small hands shaking. Their parents, Sarah and Mark, exchanged a worried glance. They had noticed strange things since moving in whispers in the hallways, shadows that moved on their own, and an eerie chill that seemed to linger near the pool. But they had brushed it off as the stress of moving. As night fell, the party continued. The pool lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow across the water. Emily and her friends were laughing and playing a game of Marco Polo when one of them, Mia, suddenly screamed. She thrashed in the water, her face contorted in terror. "Something grabbed my leg," she shrieked. The group laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank. But Mia's panic was real. She scrambled out of the pool, her ankle bruised and scratched as if something had clawed at her. The laughter died down, replaced by uneasy silence. The real horror began when the pool lights went out. Darkness enveloped the backyard and the air grew cold. The guests huddled together, their laughter replaced by nervous whispers. Mark grabbed a flashlight and pointed it at the pool. The beam of light revealed ripples spreading across the surface, as if something was moving beneath the water. "Everyone get out of the pool," Mark said firmly, his voice masking his fear. But before anyone could move, the water began to churn violently. A low, guttural growl echoed from the depths. The guests screamed and scrambled out of the pool, slipping and falling in their panic. Sarah grabbed Jake and Emily, pulling them away from the edge. The flashlight flickered, and in the brief moments of light, they saw a pale, skeletal hand reaching out of the water, followed by another and another. The beings emerged slowly, their gaunt faces twisted in grotesque smiles. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their bodies seemed to shimmer, as if they were made of water itself. "Run!" Mark shouted, but the creatures moved faster than anyone could react. They lunged out of the pool, their clawed hands grabbing at the guests. One of Emily's friends was dragged into the water, her screams cut short as she disappeared beneath the surface. Sarah and Mark grabbed their children and bolted for the house, but the creatures were relentless. They slithered across the ground, their movements unnatural and fluid. The family barely made it inside, slamming the door shut just as one of the beings reached for them. The next morning, the police found the backyard in chaos. The pool was eerily calm, its surface still and glassy. There was no sign of the creatures or the missing guests. The Thompsons tried to explain what had happened, but their story was dismissed as mass hysteria or a prank gone wrong. But the family knew the truth. They moved out of the house the next day, leaving behind their dream home and the horrors that lurked within. The new owners never stayed long, and the house eventually fell into disrepair. Locals whispered about the cursed pool, warning others to stay away. It was a warm summer night, the kind where the air feels heavy and the cicadas hum like a warning. A group of friends had gathered at Sarah's house for a pool party. Nothing unusual, just drinks, music, and the kind of laughter that echoes into the night. But as the clock struck 10, something changed. Emily, one of the guests, began to sing. Now, I know what you're thinking singing at a party. Big deal. But this wasn't just any song. It was a melody that didn't sound human. Her voice was haunting, almost hypnotic, and it seemed to wrap around everyone like a cold, invisible hand. The music that had been playing earlier faded into silence, leaving only Emily's voice echoing through the night. The guests, entranced, found themselves drawn to the edge of the pool. One by one, they leaned closer, their eyes glazed over as if they were no longer in control of their own bodies. And then splash. One of them, a guy named Chris, was pulled into the water, not by his own choice, but by something beneath the surface. The others snapped out of their trance just in time to see him disappear, his screams cut short as the water swallowed him whole. Panic erupted. People stumbled back, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding. The pool, once a shimmering turquoise under the moonlight, now looked like a bottomless void. The water rippled unnaturally, as if something beneath the surface was stirring, waiting. "Where's Emily?" someone shouted, their voice trembling. But Emily was gone. The only sound left was the faint, distant hum of her song, carried by the wind like a ghostly whisper. Mark, one of the guests, stepped forward, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He grabbed a pool skimmer, its long handle shaking in his grip, and extended it into the water. For a moment, everything was still, too still. And then the skimmer was yanked from his hands, disappearing into the depths. Mark staggered back, his face pale. "What the hell is down there?" he whispered. Before anyone could answer, the water began to churn violently. Bubbles rose to the surface, popping with a sickening hiss. A low, guttural growl emanated from the pool, sending chills down everyone's spines. The guests tried to back away, but it was like their feet were glued to the ground. Sarah, the host, screamed as she was dragged toward the edge. "Help me!" she cried, clawing at the grass. But no one could move. They were frozen, their bodies betraying them as Emily's melody grew louder, more insistent. Sarah's fingers slipped from the ground, and she tumbled into the pool. The water swallowed her whole, her screams cut off in an instant. The others watched in horror as her silhouette twisted and writhed beneath the surface before vanishing. One by one the guests fell into the pool. Each time the water seemed to come alive, pulling them under with a force that defied reason. Mark was the last to go. He fought with every ounce of strength he had, but it was no use. As he was dragged into the water, he caught a glimpse of Emily standing at the far end of the pool, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She was smiling. The next morning, the pool was still. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the bright morning sun. There was no sign of the party, no evidence of the chaos that had unfolded the night before. The only thing that remained was a faint, almost imperceptible humour melody that lingered in the air, waiting for the next unsuspecting guests to arrive.